So, I made a 20-minute recording and uploaded it to YouTube, and YouTube failed me. And yes, I am going to blame YouTube. I am. It's their fault. Okay, I'm over that. Hi, Aaron. Made a lot of changes. They're not fresh on my brain right now, so hopefully this is not more than 20 minutes as I wander through this. Hoping you can take a look at it, and we can meet up next week, maybe even Monday if that works, to get some feedback. I think Monday works for me. Anyway, we'll talk. Okay, so I want to go through the plan on the left. This is for Venture High School. This is for the 4th of October. Yep, so a week from today. And I've made a lot of changes, so we're going to go through that. I want to start by giving goals. I'll probably give them a version of this agenda. And then I want to lay out my goals. So these 3 GIFs are my goals. This is what I'm hoping they experience. So there's 1. There's 2. I'll go ahead and present this. And here's 3. I'm hoping that they are curious, that they feel ready, and that they go together with me, but also since it's an entire school, I'm hoping they have at least one other person in their building that they can take the next steps with if they're interested and feel equipped to do that. So those are my goals for the day. I want to go through that. Then we're going to jump into just a brief discussion of what design thinking is, like really quick. Hey, it's a design process. Everything you do is design. Our work on the handout that we're sending out to teachers to advertise this kind of got me thinking about that, right? Everything we do is design work. So I want to frame teaching as designing. And so what we'll do then is we'll put on our designer hats and we'll use a designer's framework to do design. I want all that to be really fast, like less than 5 minutes if possible, because I want to get right into the wallet challenge, which I think I've gone through with you before. Essentially, you and a partner are going to redesign someone's wallet, how to carry stuff, and it takes you through all 5 steps of the design thinking process. And it's sort of our first interaction with it. Then we'll take a break. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about why design thinking. So I'll give you a little bit of this. We've talked about what it is, but the big question is why. Specifically, why in education, right? Like if this was for product design, why are we doing this here? So I'll give you an example. There's 2 pictures. And what I'll do is what I'm doing with you right now is I'll just go back and forth between the pictures. And then I will ask them what they notice. And I'll go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then eventually we'll get to a point where we're having a conversation about this is not new and this is not new. But through a designer's lens, it's possible to do something new and innovative. And my slides are obviously out of order. So what should have happened is it should have gone to that. We may also talk about the Zune. I think this single example is probably compelling. So, I'm going to make that decision right now. We're going to get rid of the Zune. Okay. And we'll take that off the plan. We'll tell the OXO story. So as we make the move together to shift this into education, we need to talk about the mindsets, which I think I went through with you before, so I'm not going to go through again. There's an opportunity for them to talk about their teacher identities and see a word cloud. I may or may not show teacher identities that I uncovered. Then we're going to get into mindsets. So having teachers think about their mindsets, right? What do they think about who they are? And how does that impact their ability to design, right? So they have to have a consciousness of self as they are engaging in design work, because they're going to have to pay attention to what they think and feel, and also pay attention to what their users, which in this case are students, think and feel. So we'll go through that. Just a reminder, each one of these, they have a chance to actually vote. So this will be live for them. There will be an opportunity for them to put their answer in, and we'll get to see live like a temperature reading of the room. So we'll go through there. Now we've been sitting for a little while. We've done some heady work. I want to get them up and get them moving. So this is the Flip Your Space activity. This came from the travel pack of cards from designkit.org. So tape, paper, scissors only. Prototype their ideal classroom. Be prepared to share with the group why this is your ideal teaching environment. So we're gaining empathy right now, but we're gaining empathy for them as the educator. And we don't want to swing the pendulum so far when we're talking about student-centered learning that we ignore the teacher. Because neither completely teacher-centered learning at the expense of student and their position, nor totally student-centered learning at the expense of the teacher and their position is what we're actually talking about. We're talking about doing a better job of both. So we're going to talk about the teacher and their place, position, value, and role in the classroom. So we'll reflect out about that. Then we're going to move to thinking about design thinking at Venture. So this is sort of our first transition point. So far what we've been doing is thinking about design thinking as a process and using it in sort of arbitrary ways. We've started to shift to think about themselves, and now we're starting the transition to think about their school, right? So if you think about these transitions happening, it's a design process. But what we most often do with the design process, like if you talked about, I wasn't really thinking about myself as a designer, and I'm busy doing teacher work, this is what teacher work most often looks like. Like, I have a problem I need to solve. I'm going to come up with a few ideas pretty quickly about it. And I may or may not have a chance to test those ideas. So probably I'm not even going to test. I'm just going to come in and get an idea, come up with a few solutions, maybe have a quick chat with my neighbor, and then I'm going to go do it. Maybe I'll test and iterate if I get to teach this again next year, but who knows if that even happens. I thought this video was really compelling. I had a conversation with Jeff from the Salmon Public Library, and he talked about the challenge for teachers often in design thinking and project-based learning is it feels like one more thing. And what we're trying to avoid is it feeling like one more thing. Design thinking isn't one more thing. It is a different way of viewing the same work we are doing. And I think it's really interesting for us. And by the way, the thing I'm saying right now, I'm going to say a very similar thing, just processing out loud with our participants about this while this video is playing in the background. And I'm not going to talk about what the video is. I'm just going to let it play. So what we often do as teachers is we feel like the work is the work of actually like creating the lesson and giving the lesson and grading the lesson and moving on to the next lesson and figuring out how to standards fit and all this stuff. And Jeff's analogy I thought was really good is he said, when you build a house, that's a lot of work, right? To build the house. But in the period of time, and this is where I put my hands up in the air, from the starting point, which is, hey, I want to build a house, to the ending point, which is my house is built. Only a portion of that is the physical site prep and house build. In fact, it's not even half of the work. The vast majority of the work in building a custom home happens over a long period of time, and at the end of that process, we get the house build. So it's interesting. We have this video here where it's being taken over, I don't know how long this takes. We could look it up. A very long period of time, a really cool time lapse showing this house being constructed. But even this is not the whole process. There is no time lapse for all the head work, right, that they've had to do to prepare to be successful in this. And so one of the challenges of design thinking is we're engaging you metacognitively in the head work. It's not that you don't already do this head work. You do. You do. But what makes this feel potentially like one more thing, is that it feels like it's keeping us from this process, right? Doing this stuff takes us away from what we're used to spending our attention on. Okay? So what we're going to do in order to shift our thinking to shift our focus of our design thinking for the afternoon on to Venture High School is we're going to introduce you to a new set of tools. And unfortunately, This is what happens in education when you have a new set of tools. There's a new language. So we have been doing so far in the last 2.5 hours, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We're not experts on it. And we're going to shift the conversation. So in order to do that, we have to talk about the relationship between these two. First of all, the set of resources we're going to give you, which is really important for you to have, also comes from IDEO, right, who gave us the other design thinking. But they have encapsulated it in a different flow. And I think it's really helpful before we go any further. You're going to get in designkit.org and you're going to play. Before we get any further, we want to talk about how these two things are related to each other because they're not different processes. What's helpful at times is to break design thinking down into its individual 5 components, which is why we started there as a group. And sometimes it's helpful as you start to internalize it a little bit more to naturally flow from one to the next. And that's what this diagram gives us, I think, is flow. This one feels more stilted. It also doesn't really give us this idea of it being iterative, right? Like I want a circle. So we're going to use this one, the curvy one, because it's the language being used by designkit.org. So we're going to engage in that. And in order to help you shift, right? So now it's not just about design thinking. It's not just about you as a person. It's not just about your classroom. We're widening our focus, right? So you can imagine zooming out and looking at a bigger focus here. In order to do that, we're going to do a little sticky activity where they're going to brainstorm about the context in which they teach. So 5 minutes, sticky notes, 1 idea per sticky. Every single person's going to write. They'll take turns one at a time. We'll have a protocol for that. Similar for community and then for constraints. Then we're going to come out and have an activity, a way in which they share those things. Then we're going to go to lunch. Then we're going to come back from lunch. And I need some kind of quick focusing activity. I may chuck it. It kind of depends. It'll be a little throwaway, lightweight activity. It would be an icebreaker if it was in the morning. It will be some sort of, hey, lunch is over, let's reset. I think that can be useful, but we'll figure that out. Then what I think I want to do is I want to show a little bit of my homework. And I think this is a challenge to do this well, but I want to give them another perspective on how design thinking is just a way of organizing stuff that we're already doing. So I, a month ago, met Teresa, the principal, and Barb told me essentially like, hey, Teresa is interested in design thinking training for her whole staff. Can we facilitate that? And the answer is yes, we can facilitate that. But design thinking training, to do design thinking well, requires that it be contextualized and individualized. And that's a challenge when you're trying to provide design thinking training to a staff that may or may not want that thing. And when you know nothing about the staff. So what I did was I jumped in and I actually used design thinking. And here's the first little glimpse of our designkit.org methods, right? So here's designkit.org. Here's the methods, which they as a group are going to be playing with in the afternoon. They're split into sections: inspiration, ideation, and implementation, which, you know, if we look at this side by side, this is actually what we're doing: the inspiration, the ideation, and the implementation. So I want to show my homework, not in detail, but just to say I went through a bunch of these because they're helpful. I viewed creating design thinking training as a design challenge in itself. And so I thought I'm going to use the design kit to help me do that. I got down to a point where I really wanted to plan the afternoon because the morning was clearer for me. The afternoon, the part we're doing right now, was the challenge. How do I contextualize this and make it meaningful for you all? So I got a really cool response from Teresa, and I'll have a slide for this. I'll show it, where I asked her to think about some of these reflection questions. What's going on in your school? What is your context? What are your needs? I also visited. I got to meet some of you. I got to see some classrooms. I got to feel the culture of your school through the eyes of a teacher. I mean, I've been teaching for quite a while, so I can feel a lot of that. I've been in different learning environments. Okay, so here's what I did. I took these components, these sort of possible little sandboxes or areas that we could start asking questions of, and I broke them apart. So one of the statements I pulled from Teresa was, we want to find a way for kids to engage in authentic place-based problem solving. So back to the plan here. We're going to ask them to do a how might we activity. So this is why I'm showing my work, is because it leads into the how might we activity. Because this is what I started. I started taking this statement, we need to find ways to engage kids in authentic place-based problem solving, and I framed a bunch of possible how might we's. I have no idea if any of these are meaningful or connect. I'm not filtering them right now. In fact, I'm going to need you to help me add to these things, right? So this is what I'm saying to the group. The how might we activity essentially is pick one of these 5, probably one of these 3, since I've already played with 1 and 2, or maybe they really want 1 or 2, and so they're going to dig in. Pick one of these 5 and go through the how might we design kit method. They're going to go step by step through this. I think the little video is really helpful, but I'm going to basically get out of their way, let them do it. 20 minutes is not enough time, but that's what we're going to start with. Then we're going to vote. We need a protocol for voting on how do we decide as a full group which how might we are we interested in going after. And we may not be able to agree on a specific how might we. We might have to agree on a general area and then as a group come back and how might we again. We're just going to have to see how that goes. But once we have a thing we're comfortable with down to the level of how might we, whichever one it is, then we're going to go back and group them up in teams of 2 or 3, and they're going to go through the Frame Your Design Challenge method from designkit.org. They're going to go through and start making a project plan. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about next steps from here. This is where I'm stuck. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of extra time. I really don't. But I also don't want to leave them totally hanging as they leave in the afternoon. I need them to have a win. And I'm not sure what that is. This is why I want to process this with you. This is the big challenge of having 5 hours. So maybe it's an invitation to do more. Maybe it's an invitation to work with smaller groups. I don't know. I need to process it with you. I have no idea if that was shorter. That was probably still way over 20 minutes. So anyway, I've shared all the documents. I will link this video so you can actually watch it. I'll put it on YouTube, but I'll also put it somewhere else. I'd like YouTube to work. I don't know what happened, so we'll get it up there. And then when you have a chance to take a peek at it, that'd be great. Thanks, Aaron.